Thanks. We're gonna spotlight Edgar. Okay. Thanks. Do you want to come and light the chalice, Mal? Welcome everyone to Faith+Works UU Congregation of Orange. We're delighted to have Reverend Edgar Rivera Colón back with us. We're leaning into maybe it's not quite, I guess it's a sort of a contradiction of being both a lay-led congregation but also has two ministers. Edgar is very generous in his support of our congregation as our lead senior minister, to offer us some spiritual guidance through these pretty harrowing times. So we're going to light the chalice and we're going to some open words.
Shut it.
So, because it's good practice to give the spiel, we're the Faith+Works UU Congregation of Orange. There are a few of us online. Hi Darcy, hi Karen, Frank, and Margot. A few of us in person. Thanks for being here. With the faith anchor of the Faith+Works equation, where the hub does some work, and we figure out how to stay on the straight and narrow. It's a short spiel. I'm going to jump in with some opening words and then turn things over to Edgar. Marley and I and Lily Sadie took a walk in the Meadowlands today, which is one of my favorite places to walk because it's sort of easygoing and I don't know, it's very beautiful, but it's also this totally post-industrial swamp. It stinks, and there's all this remnants of industry, and it's a good place to, I don't know, I always, like Mindy's shared with us your definition of what it means to be spiritual, sort of being in the flow of the expanse. It's like a nice place to, if you need help connecting, well, if I need help connecting to that, Netherlands is a good place to be. And in particular, this practice that poet C.A. Conrad talks about of trying to cultivate a sort of love for the world as it is, not as it was or as we might wish it to be, comes to mind. So we can read a C.A. Conrad poem for our opening words today. I should also say that parent shul today rather than the sanctuary because we have little ceilings and so to make sure that we all make it home tonight. We're in here hopefully just for this month. Okay, this is our opening words. It's a poem called For the Feral Splendor That Remains. It's an indicator for Kazim Ali. It's also a poet. Sometimes I strain to hear one natural sound. When gender blurs in a poem, my world sets a tooth in the gear. If God is in me, when will I ask for my needs to be met? Every God is qualified. It is not such a secret. When I was afraid of the road, I learned to drive. Map says the name of your city and ocean, line drawn to it. Towing behind the big party history of life on Earth might be interesting to a visitor one day. Chewing parsley and cilantro together is for me where forest meets meadow. In a future life, would we like to fall in love with the world as it is, with no recollection of the beauty we destroyed today? With that, we're honored to turn it over to our Reverend Dr. Edgar Rivera Colón, joining us from Los Angeles.
Thank you very much. And thank you for that poem. Are people hearing me okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Especially the folks in the car. So first of all, thank you for inviting me to give this talk. And thanks to Karen and to Doug for sending me those letters, appointing me as a minister of this wonderful congregation of Unitarian Universalists. Thank you very much. I'll send that forward to my bishop, and I'm sure she will be very happy. I just wanted to think today about the kind of spiritual practices that maybe we don't realize are spiritual practices that we engage in all the time. And I think what we'll do today is sort of, I'll do a little bit of talking, a little bit of reading, and a little bit of declaiming something, right? Which is reading something that somebody's already. But first of all, I just want to bring our minds to this world that we're in right now. It's very complicated. It seems chaotic, trauma-inducing. It seems like, things that had centers are being decentered. In the last couple of weeks, we've seen federal workers who are doing good work get sent home, fired. And we see a world in many ways in turmoil and in confusion. Our traditions, the various traditions that we come out of, and the Unitarian Universalist tradition is very wide, so it contains many traditions. Plus, it's now 8 principles, from what I heard, instead of just 7 principles. And so one of the traditions is to capture or to be in a space of silence, right? And one thing I would recommend for folks is to spend 20 minutes a day, if you can, in silence. And the silence is not exclusive of ambient sounds, right? Even in the most silent monastery in the world, wherever that is, there's still ambient sound, right? As there's now, as a motorcycle rides near the Rio Hondo here in Los Angeles. On Sundays, it's a tradition that people bring out their antique and vintage cars here in Montebello, and they park them around the green, and they sit in lawn chairs and talk to each other. And it's like a meeting of the OGs. All the OGs sit there. And so every once in a while, I'll go down and we'll watch the cars pass by. So the silence that I'm talking about is a silence that brings a type of order and peace to our lives. I'm not asking you to pray necessarily. I'm just asking you to take out that time of silence, right? So you can have those moments that calm yourself and allow you to hear the whispers. And the sermon's title, or the talk's title, is Whispers of My Mother. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my mother, and then talk about another person who sort of functioned like a mother, although if you saw him, you wouldn't think of him as being a mother, or maybe you would. So first, my mother. One of the insights that you get as you get older is that you realize that your mother and father are seen by other people in the world, independent of your vision of them. And the psychoanalytic tradition talks about, like, you're in the bubble of the family, and then as you get older, you start peeping out and say, oh, there's something out there too. That must be interesting, right? And in the case of my mother, now many years ago, I was working for someone named Cheryl Clark, who's a sort of a famous Black lesbian feminist poet, who, for those of you who know that collection, This Bridge Called My Back, which is one of the sort of women of color, radical feminist texts of the 80s, she was a writer of that volume. When I met Cheryl, she was living in Jersey City with her then partner, now wife, Barbara Ballet, and she decided to hire me for the Office of Social Justice, which she was the dean of those kind of programs. A lot of good things came out of that. I went to Highlander Research Center. I got to know Cheryl because she would give me rides to work every once in a while. And the best way to get to know Cheryl was to be in the passenger's seat as she drove, because we talked about everything. So I sort of really value that time with Cheryl. She and her wife are now in this place called Hobart, New York, where it's a book village in upstate New York. And every year they have a women's writing festival, which I recommend highly for people to go up to. And they are the classic lesbian couple that runs a bookstore, right? And they're lovely people. If you get a chance to go to Women's Festival, go to Hobart, please do. So Dean Clark, as she was known at that time, is also a literary critic, and she wrote a book about Black feminists and writers that's really interesting as well. Which I'll email a link or something to it. She just came out with a new collection of poems as well, collected volume. So one day Cheryl's dropping me off in Jersey City. I would come in from the Bronx and stay the night in Jersey City, and then she would pick me up. And I decided to stay for dinner that night. And I think that might have been the first time she met my mother. My mother was out in the front talking to people. And she looked at me and she said to me, "Wow, your mother's really beautiful." And I had never thought about that in my whole life, that my mother was very beautiful. And if you want to know what a beautiful woman is, you ask a lesbian, you ask a Black lesbian. And she was clear. This is a beautiful woman. And I had never thought about it. I had just never thought that my mother was beautiful. I thought about my mother in many different ways. And as time's gone on, I've realized that my mother, although she was a character like all our mothers are on some level or another to us, she was also someone who would prefer to whisper wisdom than to shout it at people. And I remember one time, and gets into sort of like my manuscript that I've been writing on forever. After World War II, because of the kind of agreement that labor and capital had in the United States, there was a possibility for, let's say, a factory worker like my dad or a factory worker like my mom to actually have a house and send kids to college. That is, I think, in many ways long gone. But one of the things that my father insisted upon once I was born, I'm the second child of three, was that my mother should not work in the factory anymore. She worked in a factory owned by this guy named Benjamin. And I don't know him as Benji, because I would go there every once in a while. In Hoboken, if you can imagine that. Hoboken full of factories. Imagine that, instead of full of like shishi restaurants. And Hoboken at the time employed a lot of Puerto Rican, Dominican, and Latin American women in the clothing factories. And my mother worked in one of the clothing factories that made children's clothes. So I would always get these really nice clothes from my mother's factory. So she was fine with that. She wanted to sort of stay at home and do work at home. But because, we weren't, that wealthy, or, weren't wealthy at all, working class, my mother decided to do what a lot of women in the community did, was to take in the children and take care of the children of the women who stayed in the factory. Right. And throughout my life, there were always little kids in my house, like little kids, like toddlers. And to be honest, I mostly ignored them. Being the spoiled child of my aunt and my mother, I was their favorite. So I was like a prince, or maybe a princess would be better. Better way to put it. And so I looked, for me, they were serfs. So what are you, who are these kids, right? And I built up my resentment against them. But as time went on, I noticed, as I got older, became an adult, left school, joined the Jesuits, went to Central America, left the whole shebang, right? That my mother continued to do that work, even when she didn't need it necessarily. My father already had retired, he had a pension, plus his Social Security. And she would take on just one or two kids, usually related to us through, blood or fictive kinship. And I noticed that almost all the women whose kids she took care of were in fact single mothers. And once they picked up the kid, if they were in a rush, they would sit down with my mother and have coffee. And my mother would counsel. So they would say what their problems were. Occasion they couldn't pay for the child care. She said, well, pay me later, or pay me some other time. And I realized that my mother's work was mostly as a community counselor, right? As someone who took care of people, right? No joke that I'm in the ministry. No joke that I was, worked in community services for so long, right? No joke that I'm an anthropologist, right? What do? We listen to people in communities. So my mother's two things that she always would say to these young women who were going through all kinds of stuff. And one of the insidious things about being a Latina working class woman who's single is that sometimes straight men think you're sexually available somehow because you're not attached to a man. You can think about all the dynamics that include both at work and in the community. And my mother would say to them, when they would complain, she would go through the complaints and all that stuff and say, I know, I raised 3 kids, And she would say, lo mucho que te falta. There's so much more work to do. And she would just, mi hija, my daughter, right? She only had one daughter, my sister Lily, but she would call them mi hija. And it stuck with me that what my mother was saying to them was, the work is only beginning. There is much more work to be done. So prepare yourself for that. And the other thing she would say, which gets quoted in the article in Sojourners that got published this March that I wrote, was, no hay mal que dura 100 años, ni cuerpo que lo resiste. There is no evil that can last 100 years, nor a body or anybody that can resist it, right? So I think in those two sayings, what my mom was saying to these young women, first, that the work is always ahead of you. Secondly, that evil doesn't always persist. And I've been thinking about that. And I formulated whispers because my mother was not a like gregarious person. She had her people. She was a Scorpion, or Scorpio, I think, which I think means something to the astrology people. And I find myself ruminating and going back to that kitchen with my mom and these young women and just staying there with her. In my tradition of spiritual direction, we do an exercise called composition of place. I think I've mentioned it before in giving a sermon here at Faith+Works. And that piece is going back to memories and taking the position of different people in those scenarios, whether it's my position or the young woman or my mom's, and staying with that and see what comes up. See what comes up in your passions, in your soul passions. I recommend that as a spiritual practice, right? So silence and also composition of place exercises to key memories that help your soul, that feed your soul. And I didn't think that my mom, taking care of these brats, as I would consider them when I was a kid, they're brats, right? Invaders into my domestic realm, that they would be a source of spiritual help. And they are. They are. And those two principles, there's so much more work ahead. And this evil will not last forever, nor will your body have to endure it, are key principles for me at this time that we're living in. I don't need to tell this congregation what's going on. This is an alert, politically sophisticated, spiritually engaged, community engaged congregation. So I won't rehearse that. But I will say this. Ash Wednesday occurred this Wednesday for those of us who follow those traditions. And I was called as a member of Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice. I'm a volunteer clergy there. To the pantry, the original pantry, a restaurant in downtown LA that has been there for many, many years and is run by a foundation, the Reardon Foundation. Remember, there was a guy named Mayor Reardon of LA, founded a foundation. And the foundation actually owns the restaurant, which I've never heard of before, but that's what the case is. So they're closing, and they actually closed, and they got rid of all these workers. And there were workers who'd been there 47 years, had started as waiters in their 20s and stayed till 67. So we had an Ash Wednesday service there with the workers, with the union that represents them. It was a unionized restaurant, Unite Here. And we had powerful testimony. And the formula we used for the Ash Wednesday service was a little different. For those of you who know that tradition, what I would do traditionally would be, thou art, dust, and to dust thou shalt return. That's the original formulation of it. But in this case, the Clue clergy decided to say to folks, you are stardust, and to stardust you shall return. That we are part of the universe, that we were here at the beginning, and that you will return to that beginning. And it was a very powerful Ash Wednesday. It was raining, which is weird in LA. It never rains in LA. It's raining, raining, raining. So it's almost like a cinematic Ash Wednesday. And the workers and the union will continue to fight the good fight to reopen the restaurant. And the Reardon Foundation, which is a 501c3, I'd imagine, said that they wanted to sell it to the highest bidder because they wanted to provide service for the Los Angeles Unified School District, which they do. But they were pitting these public school kids against their parents, actually, the same working class people. So God willing, put that in your prayers that can change. That some entrepreneur will come that has a good heart. That happens, right? Who will buy it, or some organization, or the Reardon Foundation might have a change of heart. The next thing we did with a bunch of Catholic workers who are Catholic anarchists, who are friends of mine, and a bunch of other clergy people, we went to the federal building and we had a vigil there. And the Catholic workers, being the radicals that they are, took the executive orders of Trump, burned it in front of the building, created ashes, and mixed the liturgical ashes with those ashes of Trump's executive orders. And then we had a ritual, and I passed out a lot of ashes next Wednesday. So I think ritualizing, symbolizing, remembering in this time is very important, right? And for us in LA, to both have a rainy day where ashes are distributed in light of the fires was a very powerful moment for a lot of people. Very powerful moment. We were becoming aware of how we are earth, we are fire, we're sky. I'm thinking about that sky that Karen and Frank are giving us right now. We are sky and we are water. So, apropos of the mother thing, I'm going to read a little bit of a manuscript that I wrote that's still in process. And I rarely do this in sermons, but I want to do it this time. And the section is a very quick section. It's called I'll Go Home to My Mama in the Project, right? And this is about Albert Santana, who was one of my lead informants in my dissertation work.
It's us.
We okay?
Sorry.
No problem.
First the roof falls down, then the internet stops working. Give me a break. Okay, I think we can.
Okay. You sound like my friend's church. Pastor Wolf's church. All right, so I'll send them your love. I'll be singing him this week for coffee.
Please.
So this section is called I'll Go Home to My Mom and the Projects. And I'm reflecting on soul power. So exemplars of soul power abounded in my life. Had I done revolutionary listening and discernment, I would have awoken sooner from my academic and secular slumber. Herbert Santana, person who introduced me to the community, house ballroom community, upon which I would base my dissertation research, taught me a number of tactics and strategies in challenging institutional authority. In the fight's early days, Arbit was an AIDS activist and community educator involved in clean needle exchange, activism in the neighborhood of which he grew up, Manhattan's Lower East Side. He then moved on to work with the house ball community, a Black and Latinx, LGBT, alternative kinship network, and competitive dance and performance circuit. For those of you who are interested, go to Netflix and look up Pose, FX. During his life, Arbit was one of the best organizers, activists, educators, HIV prevention practitioners, and thinkers that New York City's house ball community ever produced. After his death, no one has been able to fill his shoes or replicate the depth and breadth of his work and community engagement. He was the ethical and political conscience of the house ball community. At moments, Arbit was also irascible and gifted in dressing down anyone who put on airs with him. So that girl was shady when she needed to be, as they say in the ballroom. Since his rage was usually on spot, I relished watching him lure his soon-to-be penitents with effusive charm into conversation and then finally, and the final verbal blows to get them back on the right path, or at the very least, out of the way of what he considered to be the community's progress. Arbit was, in the parlance of the balls, fierce. One day, he told me a story about workplace politics that remains in my mind as an example of soul power in the service of the community, in the service of community dignity when it is unleashed on the clueless and overprivileged. Arbit worked at the leading HIV/AIDS organization in New York City for most of his career. Like many organizations that emerged out of popular mobilizations and struggles, it went from direct action of the streets and the community advocacy into a not-for-profit world, brightly lit corridors, and became bureaucratized even while still doing important education, direct service, and public policy work. So many times in this country, people and groups start off with a radical vision and to change unjust structures and end up with careers and professional specializations that, wittingly or not, reconstitute domination and contain or domesticate the stark and life-snuffing contradictions that first drew them into the battle for social justice. Arbit was aware of these contradictions and, through bitter experiences, learned to be in these institutions, but not of them. To be in them, but not of them. Although he never would have used these terms, Arbit was an excellent tactician in what Antonio Gramsci, the Italian communist activist and thinker, would call the war of positions, the everyday trench warfare that ordinary people have no choice but to engage in throughout the myriad institutions capitalism creates and maintains to control the commanding heights of wealth and political power. Obviously, this includes the not-for-profit sector in which Arbit spent his professional life. One day after spending the early evening handing out condom packets to community members and informing them of free HIV testing options, Arbit and I sat watching the flow of people on the Christopher Street piers. We started talking politics. And as if to knock me down from my high horse of revolutionary rhetoric, I was a Marxist-Leninist back then, Arbit refocused our conversation off his politics. I now realize that Arbit was teaching me that a good jump downscale politically is a refreshing way to train the mind in the concreteness of everyday struggles. In his inimitable way, he was not so gently telling me to look closer to my own experience if I really was committed to social change, revolutionary or otherwise. Like many people of color who are in middle management positions in community organizations, Arbit saw class structure largely in racialized and credentializing terms. So he would often refer to the white people with letters after their names when he spoke to me of the very well-paid top executives at his organization. As if administering a Zen koan to a novice monk, he began to tell me about a recent meeting he and the other middle managers were called to by the executive team. Throughout the meeting, the top people complimented the managers for their work on behalf of our community, while continually making the point that they needed more numbers to report to the private and public funders that called the shots outside of the organization. It was quite obvious to Arbor that more resources were not forthcoming despite the executive team's clear demand for a work speed up. Less is more is not an aesthetic choice. It's one of the capitalism's favorite disciplinary devices to extract more value from an already overworked and underpaid labor force. He told me that he kept on watching the executive director as he pretended to be above the fray and on everybody's side. I saw the way he handled the meeting, such a politician, not wanting to hurt our feelings. Sorry for saying this. He's a freaking snake, and the executive team around him are the grass that he hides in. The meeting became contentious once the lack of resources for these greater numbers or measurable outcomes, to use that parlance, were put on the table by the middle managers. As things heated up and the threat of funding cuts, a not so subtle euphemism for job cuts, was invoked by the member of the executive team, Arbor spoke up with his customary abrupt clarity. He told me that he looked at the management team and said, "Oh, look, you can cut whatever you like, but I'm very clear on one point. I wasn't born in this organization. This is just a job. I'll always work for my community whether I'm here or not. I can walk away from this place anytime I want because I can always go home to my mama in the projects." The executive team was stunned at Arbor's incontrovertible sense that he had the freedom to walk away from the organization because he had his mama in the projects waiting for him. He had a family, a people who had his back, especially when the institutions he had to work in did not. Moreover, he did not come to New York City to be a mainstream gay man like so many white men did and still do at that time. Arbor had to be gay in the projects, not the gay-friendly gentrified neighborhoods of Manhattan and Brooklyn. He could not and would not run away from his family, from his mama, family, house ball community, or his folks. Arbor understood that his work, the work, as he always talked about it, was about building the community's already enormous reserves of soul power in the ongoing struggle for dignity and freedom in this white America. Arbor is gone now. As the Hebrew scriptures would tell it, he has been gathered to his people, our people. He is often in my thoughts these days, given the shifts in the political climate in this country. Arbor had an uncanny combination of strong clinical insight into why people behave the way they do, as well as a finely tuned understanding of community and institutional politics. He could sniff out a fraud or a scam from miles away and dealt with these frauds in a manner that isolated them from Arbor's base in the house ball community where he exercised leadership. Once his kidneys failed and he had to be on dialysis, I could see that he was trying to leave a structure in place that would allow a higher level of leadership and organization to develop. After his death, that structure would develop into a national leadership meetings that would allow house ball leaders to develop their skills, but also jump the national scale. I'm going to stop there. Why this story? So this story is about the fact that Arbor understood himself as part of a group of people, that the institutions were places in which we struggled, which we made money, we had our lives perhaps, but in the end, the reference point was his mama in the projects. And of course, he was a house mother himself. So I bring that today because although I wrote this a while ago, somehow, to me at least, it feels relevant to the moment we're living in, that we must have places to return. We must have places where we can meet and hang out with our folks and with the mom on the project. The Hub, U of O, Faith+Works is your projects. It's your mama in the projects. And one of the things I would say is that maybe one of the ways to deal with what we're dealing with now is to ask ourselves, where do we go home? and where are our homes? Where are the home places we have constructed? I just want to say to people today that we're going to see a lot of suffering, and we may at times feel overwhelmed by it. And, I know that the series is going to be going on Wednesdays that my sister went to, Lily, in terms of managing shock and awe. And I've heard very good things from Lily and from her friends who went. And I want folks to maybe think about that, to consider that this is a time to deepen Faith+Works, to deepen the hub, to deepen U of O. This is a place to strengthen it. This is a time when we cannot live out the narcissism of petty little differences. We don't have that luxury anymore. Nor do we have the luxury of despair. I didn't say don't feel despair. I said we don't have the luxury of it in the sense that it cannot possess you. When despair comes, treat it like a demon. Name its name. Say, I know you're despair. I know you're a lot of people in that little evil head, and I'm not going to allow you to sit at my table. I'm not going to allow you to sit in my soul. I'm not going to allow you to sit in my body, even if I feel bad, right? So Jesus, in dispelling demons, he names that, right? Because I know who you are, right? So when you hear the despair scruples, what I call the despair scruples, nothing's going to get better. Give them a name, say, look, Charlie, I know who you are. Get the hell out of my head and soul. Right? The other piece is this, and I want to talk a little bit about soul power, and I'll use the article as a way of thinking about it. Soul work births soul power. It frees little sparrows to cross vast oceans and sky-embracing mountains. And what is soul power? Soul power is the dynamic force that popular freedom struggles generate and unleash when we, the too long oppressed, begin to show up in undistracted fullness to our lives and people, such that the oligarchs' violence and corruption can no longer use fear or even death itself to detain us on the way to building a new earth and sky. It's so good that you guys are providing a sky for us. It's like it's aligned with my spirit, and then there's the stained glass window. So it's like it's a dialectic that I love. Soul power gives rise to the charismatic gift of revolutionary spiritual discernment, so desperately needed by the world's little sparrows. I include all of us in the little sparrows. The gift is not for the benefit of individuals alone, although it may take that form for a collective. Soul power ultimately is for the nurturing and defense of the common weal. And that's it. The hub, Faith+Works, the U of O, is our common weal, our welcome table, right? And I urge you not to take on things that are beyond your capacity, because it's an urgent moment and we want to take on the cycle of the crisis. I urge you to be slow, methodical, silent, and also do composition of place, right? Think about the memories you have at Faith+Works, at the hub, U of O. And this urging is about a slowing down so the soul power can be manifested. You say, well, freedom, liberation struggles, Edgar, what are you talking about? We're just a bunch of folks getting together. I saw soul power at my mother's kitchen table with those young women. I saw soul power in the piers with Barbette Santana giving out condoms and talking to people. I saw soul power when Barbette said, I'm going home to my mama in the projects. I see soul power every time the hub has a meeting and engages people and is trying to do something good with that hospital, the former hospital in Orange, trying to have something else besides gentrification. I see soul power when root shock is used by various people throughout the world to describe the moments they're living in. And we are living in a moment of root shock. Certainly here in LA, we are. If you go to Altadena, what you see is burnt out lots. And we need to have rituals to expel the forces that would destroy human life and invite those forces that would nurture it. So, I mean, that's really what I wanted to say today, that my mother's whispers persist. Now, I don't know if your mother's giving you a whisper or not. Maybe your mother liked to shout, right? But whatever it is, and yesterday was International Working Women's Day, right? It wasn't just International Women's Day, it was International Working Women's Day. And I think about my mom, about all the women that work every day in all kinds of ways to preserve us, to sustain us, to nurture us, to feed us spiritually and physically and psychically and emotionally. And so that soul power is available to us. As Unitarian Universalists, I come out of the Christian tradition, but I know that we have divine agency. And why do I know that? Because God is everywhere. God is everywhere. God is in you, God is in me, God's in that stained glass window. God's at the Cape, God's in Vermont, in Maine, God is in Orange, God is in the street of Jersey City, it's in the South Bronx, it's in the East LA where I live. The Spirit of God, for she is wise, is everywhere, redundant in grace, and looking for your goodness. God is everywhere. And in the Eastern tradition of the church, the old tradition of the church, there's a word for it, it's called theosis. We are all becoming God. We're in a God process, right? To which evil, in the end, will not be able to win. I'm going to end this talk today with a little quote, and it brings me back to El Salvador. In the 80s, I lived in El Salvador in 86, and then I got kicked out, and then I lived in Nicaragua in 87. But that's a sermon for another day. But that time, Oscar Romero's, tomb monument was in the cathedral, of course, but it was very simple. I mean, it was just like a stone, a quote, and people would leave little, what they call obsequios, which are little plaques thanking him for graces received, right? He was a martyr. He was killed in 1980 by the military because he was seen as a voice of the poor in El Salvador. And we could go over the whole history of El Salvador if you want one of these days. Suffice it to say, the United States was on the wrong side and sending like $1 million a day in military aid to El Salvador when I was there. But Monsignor Romero, people collected his work, and he has a collection that Orbis Books puts out called The Violence of Love. And that's paradoxical. That's almost like a koan. How can love be violent? So it's almost a koan, right? It's like one of those things. It's like when Jesus says to the rich man, okay, you can follow me, just give up all your money. It's like a Zen master saying, oh, that's fine, no problem, give up all your real estate, follow me. I love those moments when prophets do that, And so I'm going to read to you this little piece. It's called Love Remains. And we used it on Ash Wednesday. The workers read it in English and Spanish of all those workers who've been, basically locked out and fired from their jobs. So we're going to keep them in our prayers that they may be restored to the work that they loved and the community they had as workers. So I'll just read it, and then I'll end there, and then maybe we can reflect. Huh? So Monsignor Oscar Romero, who's now a saint, actually, right? And lived from 1917, the year of the Bolshevik Revolution, actually, till 1980. And he became Archbishop in 77, and he would die in 1980. As he was actually saying Mass, he was killed in the chapel of nuns who ran a hospital in San Salvador. You can go there and visit that. They still have the his liturgy flows and everything. Love remains. The present form of the world passes away, and there remains only the joy of having used this world to establish God's rule here. All pomp, all triumphs, all selfish capitalism, all the false successes of life will pass with the world's form. All of that passes away. What does not pass away is love. When one has turned money, property, work in one's calling into service of others, then the joy of sharing and the feeling that all are one's family does not pass away. In the evening of life, you will be judged on love. In the evening of life, you will be judged. So I think I'll end my talk here and hope no one's in the evening of life. Hope you're all like more or less in the middle. But it's good to remember what Monsignor Romero said, that in the evening of life, you will be judged by love. And if the hub exists, if Faith+Works Unitarian Universalist Congregation exists of Orange, if the U of O, People's Restoration, Urban Restoration University exists, it's because the measure and the judgment has been love. And that's the key. Thank you. Let's have some conversation.
So Edgar, that was great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
We have time for a few reflections, comments, right?
I wore my Protestant gray because Unitarians are the left wing of the Protestant movement. So I thought I would wear my gray to say instead of my black, you know.
Oh, we lost them. Hello? Are we still with you?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh yeah, you're here. So why can't
We are here.
see you? Oh, because they're up there. Okay, I was trying to make it so they could see us and we could see them.
I know, but we'd have to go to this, I don't know.
Okay, so you just have to.
Let's imagine
That's
us.
fine.
Yeah, but we can see. No, we can see.
We feel you.
Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Karen.
Yeah,
Karen, Frank of the Blue Sky.
any
I just want to say thank you, Reverend Dr. Edgar. Those words were so on time, so appropriate. I got so much from them. Thank you.
Look.
It
Thank
was
you.
it was fabulous.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm learning to do new things. So watch this.
What did he do?
I'll do it again for you, Doug.
I can do it
'Cause
too.
Yeah, there we go.
You might go.
I learned that from my nieces. And I learned a new word too from my nieces called bussin. 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 If something's bussin, it's very good. So there you go. I'm learning.
Great.
If anyone has a question or just want to say something, feel free.
So Edgar, thank you. It's Frank driving. So
Hey,
I'm
Frank.
not seeing you guys. I'm not seeing you guys, but I certainly heard everything and enjoyed it. And the thing that hit home for me in your talk was that sense of being able to go home, being able to return to the people that give you comfort and who embrace you and accept you as you are. And when I get together with these cousins, and it was my cousin Kevin, who I grew up with, and my cousin Michael, who was a few years younger, there is just such an overwhelming feeling of love that it's beyond description, and I couldn't put my finger on it, but I have to tell you, we enjoy, and Karen, of course, enjoyed herself because she loves those guys, but I just felt such a connection with family and with my history, the history of my family on my father's side, that every time we get together, we talk about the Barrs family, and I know it drives his husband crazy, but we can't help it. And it's some reminiscing, but it's just such a comforting feeling of being connected in a way that you just don't know otherwise. I don't experience otherwise. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for reminding me of how valuable that experience is.
Well, thank you, Frank. And as you're riding home, you're you're helping us with the home places piece. And I feel the same thing when I meet with my cousins in Jersey, and or my old comrades in the Bronx. I feel very much at home and home places, right? And what I think home places allow us to do, and usually it's relational, right? It can be a geographical space, it can be a group of folks. It allows us to enjoy the memories that we've had, but also to
Yes.
recall that we are kin. And it very much aligns with Margot's, sort of provocation for us around the artwork contest around cousins. Who are our cousins? An expansive notion of cousins. And I think one of the things that's clear to us in this particular moment, those of us who come from universalist tradition, humanist traditions, religious humanist traditions, is that in a time of epochal change, people can get very, very fixated on a very narrow understanding of identity, right? Whereas, in fact, I think the provocation that Dr. Margot Simmons gave us was your cousin can be, that rock, right? That vista, Cape Cod in evening, right? That's also your cousin. And I think that's an important thing to think of us as we live through this climate change aspect of it. So thank you, Frank, for that. And thank you for your words. And thank you, Margot, for the provocation around cousins. I think that's going to continue to be a theme for us as we do our work together.
Edgar, this is mine. You probably know that. Anyway.
No, I don't. I can't recognize that.
This was so beautiful. But a few things. It's interesting because Mindy was and Becky was there, and Doug was there, just giving a talk about Homeboy Came to Orange and uplifting the theme in that book, how after they're all under attack in McCarthyism, sort of declaration of the National Negro Labor Council is retreat to the ghetto and come back strong. So that's so resonant in that sort of theme. Was interesting. And then just as an aside, I didn't really have being Jewish and Unitarian, I don't know that much about Ash Wednesday, but I really appreciate
Look at this.
stories of Ash Wednesday. You know what I mean? I don't really know, but I really loved those stories of Ash Wednesdays. And I was also thinking, how Mayor Wu's testimony at Congress was so powerful. And I felt, even though I didn't know all the meanings of Ash Wednesday, I was like, I feel like it's powerful that she has her ashes on her forehead. Ash is saying Ash is standing up and speaking truth to power and speaking up for immigrants. And so I don't know, that was just my Ash Wednesday reflection.
No, that's great. I mean, actually, the Ash Wednesday comes out of Jewish tradition, right? That mourning in Jewish tradition is also this question of sitting in ashes and the role of ashes, right? And it recalls also the destruction of the Second Temple by the Roman Empire, that rabbinic Judaism actually is birthed precisely because the Jewish people could no longer have a temple in Jerusalem. And so rabbinic tradition, so actually the Torah takes over the role of the temple. And it's this long debate around the Torah that develops the Talmud and all that. And I'm learning this from my Jewish, because I'm part of a group of, folks who include a number of Jews, If Not Now, Jewish Voice for Peace. And a number of them are, one of them is actually a rabbi who teaches at the American, Jewish University here in LA. So it's the ashes is a continuation of that tradition. So it is sort of part of the Jewish tradition, but you know how Christians are, they go all crazy with stuff.
Great. Well,
That was great.
thanks everyone. Thanks,
Edgar,
Edgar.
amazing.
Round of applause.
Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you.
A couple of
You're welcome. God bless you all. Get home safely.
Thanks, Edgar. Couple of announcements. One is our next Faith+Works is on April. Oh, Darcy left. Shoot, is on April 13th, which I think is a Sunday, and it's Darcy's friend who's Marcia LaBouffe something.
Oh, I guess we can't have Sarah.
Anyway, that'll be wonderful. It's Poetry Month. It'll be our second year in a row having a poet talk during Poetry Month. Good to be consistent about that. March 17th is our next potluck, which is our annual iftar potluck. It's Monday. So we'll start a little later at 6:30. So we can break and fast around 7 o'clock. And we'll have some sort of art making / activity connecting to the course Wendy's teaching.
UU84.
And then, the last thing I wanted to share was that Edgar referenced this beautiful essay of his, Soul Care for Weary Activists, I think is the title. Is that right, Edgar?
Edgar, can you hear Doug? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's going to be available. Like when they first published it, it was a link that like only lasted 5 days, but eventually they let it like be in their regular website so people can see it. But I did send you a copy of it, right?
Yeah, and I think it's still online. Yeah, it is Soul Care. It just looks like that.
Cool.
Soul Care for Weary Activists. Anyway, we'll send the link out in
Great.
email to everyone.
If there's a problem, just tell me and I'll get them to do a live link. But I mean, I just want to say that essay was actually the result of my last sermon. The first sermon I had at Faith+Works after I was ordained. That essay came directly out of that talk, where I talked about little sparrows and a reflection on Layla McCullough's version of the Little Sparrow song. So it wouldn't exist without Faith+Works, Unitarian Universalist of Orange, First Unitarian Universalist of Orange. So this is that work, that article is a direct product of our community. So we should own it for what it is. I just happen to be the articulator of it.
Well, I hope you make an essay out of this sermon as well.
That's a good idea.
Yes.
And I recognize the voice.
And we're leaving, but I also appreciate what you said about silence and time. So thank you for those. And capacity, all those things. Thank you.
Do you want to share about the chat?
Yeah, so we're having a very, very special event on March 29th here at 2 p.m. and we're inaugurating the Helen and Robert E. Fully Loved Chair of Community Health at the University of Orange. It's our first named chair. It's really exciting because it's named for super interesting people who are really dedicated to health and education, which is very meaningful for us at University of Orange. And our first professor in that role is our very own Mindy. And it's fun to be at People's University because we can name our chairs after the people who we admire and want to honor. And we can create homes for people who want to be as radical as they want to be. Space for them to share their ideas in the ways that they want to get their ideas to the people. So come be with us if you're in the area at 2 p.m. on March 29th.
We were going to name it, I wanted to name it the Becky Doggett Chair, but I was vetoed by Becky Dowling.
I forgot about that.
She said, no, it shouldn't be people who are still with us. I was like, Becky, you think you're gonna mess up? She was like, I don't know, you never know, right?
Oh, that will be like, why did we call it? Why did we name it after her?
But it's great to remember the fully loves, yeah, they were such important people in our community, yeah, and beyond.
Yeah, and people do get forgotten. Even
Yeah.
people that are very, very important.
Yeah.
They just slip away. It's an interesting thing.
So, anyway, it's gonna be a fun party.
Any last
Congratulations. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful. It's gonna be great.
any other announcements, from anyone in the room or on Zoom before we close?
No, thank you all, this was beautiful.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Cool.
So should we end with a
Thank
final
you.
blessing?
Yes.
Please, Edgar.
Okay, so if we just get in that space of spirit, however you understand spirit to be, and we ask the ancestors to protect us. We're thinking about the flow of loves in this case as their chair is developed and is inaugurated. We bless all the people on the road, in our communities. We ask the divine spirit to keep us strong, but tender and militant and loving. And we extend this night a special blessing to all those who are suffering, who are dying, who are in jail, or in the streets, who are having mental distress or spiritual doubts. We as a community send our love to them, and that blessing returns to us. And we say in the ancient Hebrew word, yes, Amen.
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 Right, folks.
Bye, everyone.
Take care. God bless.
Bye, everyone.
So for those in the room, we have tea and we also have.
I was gonna tell them after we got off so they're not jealous.
Bye, Margot. Bye, Jamie.
They might not know